Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. My guest host today is someone who is a games creator with a card game Suddenly Drunk and Suddenly Stoned, a show promoter, and a variety streamer on Twitch. Our guest host is Skaidris of the GeekPunks. Welcome to the show, Skaidris.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Pretty good. Can't complain, you know.
It's good to talk to you. It's been a little while. I think the last time we did something was we did the D&D thing with Grunge and Genie.
Yeah.
And Sawyer.
Scoots.
Scoots, yeah. That was great.
Was
Sawyer in that actually?
Was Sawyer in that?
I feel like she was.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. That's just it. Sawyer's everywhere, you know.
Right.
And then it's like when was she never there?
I'm pretty sure she was. The unfortunate thing about it is I don't think I saved that episode to
Isn't that weird?
YouTube.
I like streaming. You just you get so used to forgiving that things are temporary,
right?
That
you
just stop seeing them, and then you stop remembering. Like I've had so many amazing streams which I just didn't download or anything, and it's been a long time since I've even done that and bothered to edit them or anything or make it usable, even if I did.
Yeah, and I think when we did that one game, it was before I had sort of solidified my ideas of producing tabletop shows on my channel. And so I was saving the VODs of my ongoing campaign, just because I thought it would be fun to start off my YouTube channel with oh, this is easy content. Download it, chop off the copyrighted music in the beginning and cut out the break in the middle, to make it as short of a video as possible, and then just throw it up on YouTube. And I don't think I saved that one-off game because it was just a one-off thing. I was like, oh, this is just a thing, whatever, we'll have fun and then go back to the normal show. But now I'm trying to focus more on 8 to 10 episode blocks of content instead of an ongoing thing. That first campaign that I was running when we took a week off to run the thing with you and everybody else, that ended up being 40 something episodes, all 3.5 hours long. It's way too much. It's way too much. Who has time to sit down and watch all of that, right? So now I'm just
and who has time to edit all of that as well, even if it's just tidying up things that are already done. It's full on. When we launched GeekPunk initially was me and Scooter doing a YouTube channel, and we weren't even streaming at all. And I was putting out for the first half a year, I was putting out 2 episodes a day.
Damn.
And they were little we didn't have cameras on. It was just we were relying on just having voice and gameplay, but we were playing them we were playing games in a real punchy way that it felt like we were doing a 10-minute sort of stand-up back and forth kind of thing. And then when we started changing up format and recording longer videos and including camera and doing effects and everything, and the editing, the record, not only the recordings increased, but the editing went massive, and it went from that to a couple episodes a week. And then it just got to a point where it was we were creating an awesome product, but I was doing the job of like
whole
10
studio.
people.
Yeah.
And we couldn't survive out of like it was very streamlined how I like it, literally going into it for the 2 episodes a day thing. I was like, I have a plan to do this so it's not going to overload me. But then the more that we enjoyed it and kind of grew it, it just went to a like that's what always happens with me, to be honest. Things will grow to a point that it's no longer just manageable, but it's what entertains me the most and how I want it to be until it just doesn't can't.
Oh, I feel that in my soul. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I know it's very popular for like D&D shows or like tabletop shows to just be like face cams on the screen and that's it, right? And they just maybe you'll see like a dice tray or like the the chat log with the dice rolls in it if they're rolling like with a number generator. But like 99% of the shows out there are just face like a no scene switching or anything like that. It's just cameras, static image for like 4 hours. And I guess most people who consume that content must listen to it as an audio podcast.
Yeah.
I find it like dreadfully difficult to pay attention when
100%.
there isn't visual things switching on camera. One of the reasons I started the D&D show in the first place was like, oh, I can make scenes on my stream deck. I can make my scenes in OBS and put it on the stream deck, and I can have like close-ups, a close-up for everybody. And like when when Skaidris is talking, like I'll switch to him and put him in the like big window, so and then like whoever else is talking, right, and like swap back and forth and give some movement and some visual interest. And then it turned into the idea of like, as a DM, like I'm constantly answering people's questions. I'm constantly trying to like, if we're getting into an unprepared situation, I'm like making a map on my other computer to like switch to. And like, I realized very quickly that in order to produce the show that I want to produce, I need a director or like a producer or like a camera operator, like whatever you would want, like whatever.
I hit that exact same wall, and I roped my housemate in for a long while to produce for us. And some of the episodes we were doing on Twitch to try and recreate that same energy of the YouTube like later videos were so good. That was some of our funniest stuff, like having someone's like brain just in the camera.
Yeah.
So like they could make those decisions and they would follow what was the most interesting. Like they were some of the best things we did, to be honest. But that, once again, that wasn't viable because you then got 3 people being roped in to do a stream, and it's hard enough to get your ass off to do it with one. But that being said, like I've done like podcasts before. I've done the show as no cams, with cams, as edited, as a stream with cams, as a stream with no cams. And here's the rub that always happens. Like, you will get more people to click on and work with the algorithm and get more new people coming to it if you have faces. But once people are there, you can actually do more engaging content, and that like the no visual stuff, which is a lot easier to do once they're there. Like those, like as you said, you can like focus better and everything. People don't even realize it, but like seeing a human face is very powerful to the subconscious, and you will try and find a face wherever that it is. And so if you're playing a game and you want people to focus on the gameplay and to like embody and feel like excited like you, the player, not having your face there is the best. But if I like do a stream and my face is not on, it's like, oh, turn the camera on, like we want to see it, like, because they're there for like that friendship thing, and they want to focus on having a powwow with me. But I'm here going like, no, like I want to get into this and like have an adventure here. I want you to live in my eyes for a moment and go on this kind of journey. And they're all completely like viable ways of media, but it's almost like you really have to like call when each happens. I've been enjoying doing a lot of like no face cam streams recently with Rust, just because like otherwise people just say, oh, there's Skadris. Oh, he's playing a shooting gun game. Right. And that's all their brain connects with. And they go, am I up for a shooting gun game? No. And then they go off and they never like embody that sort of character. But like
Yeah.
when, and not only that was in like how it's observed as a viewer, but how you put the content out and how you like act and perform is differently between the two as well. If you have to worry about how you look and that, or even just that you need to make eye contact with something, some of your attention is going elsewhere. But by that very fact that there's a camera on you and that's live, even if it's being switched and looks all beautiful, where when we were doing those like say 10-15 minute episodes with no camera on YouTube, we as I said, we were treating it like it was like stand-up. Like I barely had to edit any of that because we knew when we started, all right, make sure we like get into the game, we get into like, you know, some banter or like having a discussion, and but make sure it's wound up by around this point, because if we keep talking too long, we both know it's not going to be included in it. And so then the content very like inevitably would be entirely a different beast, because you can't keep up that energy if you're recording for say half an hour or an hour and 2 hours and then edit it down, because how can you, like you can't perform a set for 2 hours twice a day, and you definitely can't be forced to go through that much content to edit down into something that could be deliverable.
Yeah.
So that was something really interesting to learn, and it's 100% translate through to streaming and stuff as well. It's just a matter about the like working the algorithm versus and having a community.
Yeah, and like the whole other aspect of it, especially with the stuff like that I do, is like I've started to like really tailor my stream content to be put on YouTube, but those two things are like a whole different beast,
Entirely different beast.
Like you said, like, a lot of people like on Twitch like want your like the face cam because Twitch is like interactive, it's a community, like you become friends with the streamers, and you want that personal connection, whereas like YouTube has that built in like distance between you and the audience because it's not live. They can't interact with it in the same way as like a stream.
They've already consented to that by being on that platform. They know that that's what that is. In fact, if you find a streamer who has put like really raw content from their stream on YouTube and they're talking to a chat that doesn't exist anymore, that feels gross.
Yeah,
watching that on YouTube and they're having a conversation that you can't even see or like being a part of, or they're laughing at something that you can't even access that information for, it feels like you can tell that it's that's just streamer content at that point, and you can like they don't know any better like a lot of the time, because it's like, well, what do you mean, like this is how I do it, this is like what that is. And it's very odd and new thing I think everyone's having to deal with.
Yeah, I leave in like we on our D&D shows, like we may reference like something that happened in chat like once or twice
About how you
throughout the
address
episode.
it.
Oh, and then the like the alerts and stuff, like I had leave that in, but my goal isn't like my goal is primarily like archiving the show just in case I ever want to go back and like a decade or whatever, be like, oh yeah, I did the thing. And if anybody finds it on YouTube, I also want it to be very clear, like it is a streamed show and it has like audience participation stuff in it. So it's almost like a 2.5 hour ad for the stream show.
I'll tell you, like I think that stuff's fine, especially because it was like they're going in with the context of knowing what it is. It's when people try and make like how-to videos, but it's them. This is the big offender that's even most. But it was, they did a how-to stream initially, and it includes all that stuff. And then so you're trying to follow along exactly like instructions for something.
Yeah, no.
And then like you like oh, thanks, Michael. Like, thanks, Michael. I'm trying to fucking figure out how to put a door like on this.
No. Like, I definitely get that.
Pay attention to me as a viewer. You can't try and pass this off as purely like YouTube content. You know, it's like they're trying to pass it off. That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I get that. Like, okay, it makes me feel good because like my instincts were correct when we started with the stream team that I'm a part of, Hero Proof. We wanted to do a like cyber western game, so like, you know, cowboys and gunslingers, like that stuff, but like with robot body parts, and then like fantasy races and like magic mixed in. It's like just a
Nice.
weird genre mashup. And
I do love
everybody was
technology
like,
and fantasy mix up. Yeah.
and like the group was like, you know, as a whole, like very, you know, into like 5th edition D&D, and we're like, well, how do we like, you know, change 5th edition to do this or that? And I was like, we don't. What we do is we use a different system that is non-genre specific and can do whatever we want. You know, like we could have chosen a game like GURPS, you know, general universal role-playing system, but like we chose the Mutants and Masterminds game, which is something that I'm more familiar with. And I went through the whole player's handbook for that game on my stream. And as I was doing that, I was like looking up, you know, like rules stuff like on Reddit and trying to find it on YouTube. And one thing I found was like, there is no like how to play breakdown of Mutants and Masterminds on YouTube. And the first thing I thought was, all right, I'm going to go through this book. I'm going to write a series of scripts, and I'm going to make how-to videos for this game for YouTube. And then the first thing in my mind was, I can't just port my streams over for this, because I'm talking in circles. I'm, you know, I'm trying to learn it myself. You know, I'm not like teaching it. I'm just trying to learn it myself. And like every 15 minutes or so, when the new person comes in, I would recap everything.
Yeah.
You know?
It's absolutely, yeah. It's like, 100%. Like, imagine trying to edit that into something that makes sense. It would be so disjointed. It'd like, you know, I don't know what it is, but it's like,
you know,
it's, what is it? There's like, I think it's like a Simpsons thing or something where someone like edits like a video and they're trying to pretend that it's real, but in the background you can see like the sun is moving up and down at the window at different points, and so you can tell that like a lot of time has passed between it. But
yeah, the shirts changed. You know, it's like snowing outside and it's raining, and it's
doing that like how-to stuff though is really, 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 really fucking smart, especially as a streamer. Like, because that's how I find new streamers most of the time now. Is I'll be looking up whatever I'm interested in on YouTube or something, especially like looking for something like how to do stuff. There's so many new things these days that are just out there where that all require like, you know, their own wiki community, or they're all this, but like the creators are often just, say, for instance, I've been hyper focusing on Rust, right? And so Rust is a game where it's like there's heaps of it's got a real PvP background, and so when you look up content for it and that, it's all like, you know, people's stories of fights they got in and that, and or trying to make the sweatiest base or whatever. But when you want to find out like mechanics about how certain things work and drops for things and how to achieve certain stuff, there's only like one or two people out there doing things, but they have huge amounts of views. And then when it comes to like, oh, I'm also on Twitch, I'm like, I want to fucking follow this person because they're the only person bothering to try and like figure this stuff out and like put content out there for it. And it's, you always keep finding them. And yeah, 100%. Cool. I think, yeah.
I tend to do the same thing with artists to a certain extent. Like, it's weird. Like the stuff I watch on YouTube doesn't really cross over with Twitch, and vice versa. Like on Twitch, I watch a lot of artists, you know, or people who engage in the chat with conversation. You know, like you guys, GeekPunks, some of you're like, I could count on one hand. And you and Scooter are on that one hand of people who aren't artists that I like to watch. You know, like, because,
well, hey, I actually studied fine arts painting at university, and I've got a degree in creative arts industries, so I'm within the field.
I did not know that. Why don't you stream more painting?
Well, that's the thing. I don't really paint or do like art so much anymore. I think I've moved on to so many different things throughout my sort of life and career, but none of them I think I ever stopped doing. I just sort of folded those talents and interests into the next thing that I do. So say like, you know, with geek punk and all that stuff now, like that requires a lot of editing and a lot of graphic design and that. And I do the graphic design, and all the editing was the stuff that I really moved into after doing the fine artwork. And the fine artwork really helped with the editing stuff, like even purely with like composition or understanding what's good or bad and why. Like, you know, why you might like something, but why do you like it? Like, can you reproduce that?
Right. It's like me doing 3.5 years of a 4-year film program only to drop out and then go get a fine arts degree, and now I stream and make comics. Like,
yeah,
I
but none
know
of that
like
was
the editing back end of it, the
yeah, none of that's not
storyboarding
disconnected. But
is
to
like
anyone else, to like a real basic person, they'll be like, "Oh wow, you really have you dropped this, and you tried that, you tried that." No, motherfucker, you're
like,
trying to get a skill base and
yeah.
knowledge that you want to actively use in a really specific way, which doesn't currently exist.
And it's all iterative too, like
Exactly.
you
Like
build
the
on
things
like
that we would
one
teach
thing and
in
yeah.
university, the things that I try and teach you for these things in like multimedia or finance and that, it's all bullshit, man. It's all
Yeah.
bullshit. Like it's all like I left studying fine arts at a really good university. I was one of like two people that got in directly out of like high school, which is like the college thing. Two people that got into this course, and I dropped out like a year and a half into it. And I think the thing that finally was the last straw, it wasn't like it was a big incident or anything, but it was, we go, all right, we're going to go to these botanical gardens and we're going to be doing some art studies. We're going to sit there and drawing. We're going to the arid garden. We're going to do some sketches and that of the cacti and everything. So we went there, and then we don't really have much direction. We're sitting there. I did a couple of doodles in my sketchbook, but I mostly got high and hung out.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and then we got back, and like the next week they're like, all right, now for the rest of this semester we're going to be doing studies on the notes, the drawings that you took in the botanical gardens, but only using these 4 shades of paint. And I'm like, well, what? First of all, I didn't take all that seriously. So I didn't do, I'd need to, if I was making like a whole fucking semester's worth of artwork on that, I wouldn't need completely a different type of sketches and notes and that. Like I would have to do it specifically for that. And on top of that, using just these like 4 colors, whatever, I understand it's supposed to be like a challenging theory practice or whatever, but
Yeah.
I'm not interested in doing that. I'm not
Right.
interested in your fucking theory. I want to
Right.
get in. I want to get fucking deep into it and start doing stuff. And this sounds like the worst, most boring, faked art reason to do anything. I'm like, no. And I just couldn't concentrate, and I just left. And that was long before I figured out
Yeah,
I was,
I was
extremely ADHD.
actually I was watching a podcast by I forget the name of the podcast, but I watched a clip of it on YouTube on the Proko channel, artist Stan Prokopenko, and he was talking to, I cannot remember the guy's name, who he does the podcast with, but the guy he does the podcast with is a like he's an artist in his own right and stuff, but he teaches classes at a university, and he was talking about how one of the biggest things that he's learned over his career as a professor, as a at the universities, is looking at students and being able to determine like the what he calls the entrepreneurial spirit. And it's
Mm,
basically like there are people like you and me who look at like the curriculum of a course and we're just like, really, like we
mm,
have to do that, like why can't we do this or this, right? Like,
mm,
and we're coming up with like our own projects and our own like we'd rather be learning these particular skills you want us to learn, but we'd like to do it in this way,
mm.
versus other people who are like just like almost pure craftsmen, right? Like just pure
Yeah.
craftspeople, where it's just like, I don't care
Linear
what the
brains.
project is. I just want to, put a brush to paper, put my chisel to this block of stone or something, right?
Mm,
And like whatever the parameters are good. And, they were talking about how like the people who like to design lessons and the like design curriculum in this particular case need to be like paired in a symbiotic relationship sometimes with like the crafts people, because like you have the ideas people, right, who like know how to get like what they want, and then you have the people who just want to execute ideas but maybe not have ideas. And it's really fun to like literally just listening to that like 3 days ago and then having you talk about like, oh yeah, if I knew that this was what I was going to do, that I have to have like a completely different workflow and like a completely different like methodology of like how to like wrap my brain around what this
Yeah, to
semester's
prepare for
going to
something like
be,
that,
you
entirely
know.
different.
And that
Well, I
was
mean,
something I always had issue with in school, is just like, you want me to do this, but why? Like, why are we doing this? Why
yeah,
can't
yeah,
I do this other thing? And it
yeah,
was always, at least in my opinion, always hitting on the root of what they were trying to teach me. It was just more interesting and fun.
yeah.
You know?
The education, in the educational institution, if I could put a better word, is not geared to work with creatives really at all, because they by
No.
definition have to be able to, they have to be able to teach someone who knows literally nothing
Hmm.
from scratch. Like, because you can't expect that everyone that would, pay money to come to your thing to learn has even a working understanding of any of these things. And so they have to wind everything back to the start. And that kind of running through a program on a linear path um, stifles just actual natural creativity. Like at that
Yeah.
point, you are just trying to make a bunch of, zombie woodworkers. I feel like we were bashing on
Right.
woodworkers.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, I hate woodworkers, man. Oh my God. But no, yeah, I mean, like I remember the time exactly in my life when I met someone who um I was describing something, creative to like a friend of mine in like primary school, and he was like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And then I had to sat and I re-explain. He's like, "Oh, yes, guys, not everyone like is creative like you and can think like you." I'm like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" And then that sort of like as I got older, I thought about it more and more and more, and you realize that there are people who aren't creative. They don't think. They can't really naturally, instinctively think about like a problem or something in a creative process. They go like, "Oh, we have X problem. Well, I don't know the answer, so I can't do it," and it stops.
Right.
Like the brain, it stops, and then they go back to doing whatever it was. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like if I come up to something that someone says I can't do, I'm like, all right, well, you're saying I can't do it now, but what do I need to do to achieve that? Like, my brain goes to that immediately. And to me, that's the creative process. Because if you keep getting
100%.
stumped on
Yeah.
something when you're creating something brand new, and then you go, no, well, I can't do it, and you leave, it's like, well, what, how do you exist? I don't get that. But those are the kinds of people that can thrive in those structures in an educational institution.
Right.
And a lot of that I put down to the fact that the more and more I'm like a late, so I'm okay, so just for backstory, I know you knew about this, but I'm like a super late diagnosis for ADHD. I'm an adult ADHD. I was diagnosed like I'm 35 now. I was diagnosed maybe like 3 years ago now, maybe, I think. And through that, it was like a massive realization of so much stuff from that. And like what the one thing that really laid down that was super clear is that I've always had like other artists, like you said as an artist, like, we're not an art stream, but you feel comfortable in that there. Like I've always been surrounded by artists and creative people and comedians and people just doing things like game developers, people that are like uh, um, in the field of creativity in some way. Like I
Right.
gravitate towards them and they've always gravitated towards me and my energy. And I used to describe it before I had my diagnosis is that I'm only interested in people that have, you look in their eyes and you can see the soul in their eyes. And that's all the language I had for it. But that was exactly it. Like it was, so when you talk to someone and you can like, you can say something really nebulous and whatever, and you can see them pondering it and thinking, like actually taking it into consideration.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, cool. This is a person I can deal with. Because if I say something to someone and you have a blank stare, like, what? It's like, oh, I'm not going to be able to, you're going to think I'm the worst person on the planet.
Yeah.
And then finding that out, I realized, the base thing, just from what everyone, forget what everyone knows about ADHD. The base of it coming from someone who, like, you know, had an outside understanding and then having the sort of self-realizations of what it, for me, was that when you look down at to scratch, is that ADHD means you lack dopamine in your body. You have it less than what is people normally have just to function, to be able to, like, if you're like sad or like low dopamine, it's harder to get out of bed. It's harder to concentrate. It's harder to focus or whatever. Our baseline is just a few notches below. And so it means that we have to just be able to hit like be okay and feel okay. We have to create our entertainment and dopamine ourselves. And that is almost always, it turns out, in creative arts, video games, like for a lot of people, sports, even like those distractions or something that feed you adrenaline and dopamine naturally in some way. And when you like sort of like start looking at like society at large, in the sense that, like, all right, well, what if every fucking creative that's interesting has ADHD to some point, and they've just been self-diagnosing through painting or art or something? It's like, holy shit, like,
right.
And to a massive degree, the amount of people that I've just from openly talking about ADHD have just sort of like, and not even like telling them you got ADHD, you got to check it out. They've gone like, oh, like, hold on, I'm kind of seeing a lot of similarities myself here, and then have gone on to doctors themselves, and then, you know, hit me up and been like, thank you, or like, can you help me with this? I'm struggling. I mean, I can't even count at the moment, like through constantly, like every couple of weeks I probably get someone hitting me
you
up.
You may be adding me to that list here in a month or so, who knows? Because, you know, I just talked to my family doc about, you know, talking to a therapist and stuff, and I've always suspected I have like depression and stuff like that, but like, honestly, like, they may say I'm also ADHD for all I know, you know?
Well, I mean, that's how I got diagnosed, was that I essentially, you know, was so depressed, and I kept burning out in all these things I was doing. Like we said before, like turning, when I'm creating, I take the next step to it. I build it up until I eventually build something up where it, like, you know, it's too big to handle. And then there's all this pressure to make it go. Like when I made Suddenly Drunk, I just wanted to make something cool. I wanted to make a fun game. And then so I made the fun game. Cool. That was a project for me. And I like kickstarted it, and that was a fun thing. But then it worked. And then people wanted it. But then, you know, I did the big push that I kind of sending out those packets and to everyone that got it. But then people kept wanting to buy it. And then my job all of a sudden wasn't that of a game designer. It was that of like a delivery man.
Right.
And I have no interest in that whatsoever. And so I palmed off to a publisher as fast as I could. As fast as I could.
And that's what they're there for, right? Is like, you know, we want to create the things, we want to make the things. We don't necessarily want to be in the like distribution publication side of it.
But when you do things that like create things out of sort of nowhere, like the same with the club, like I was just working a job in like a gaming bar, and then they like shut down, and I was like, well, you've displaced this whole community. Like, they need something. Let me make up something for them. Once again, went to crowdfunding and designed this sort of like video game bar concept where we could go to any bar, and I had these arcade machines that I built that were stacked with board games and video games and consoles and all this stuff. And they were essentially like road crates. And the concept was we could just walk it into a bar or a club that we had an agreement with to have like an event there, open up the arcades, and they were all like the exact same size, so that if we got this like truck in particular that was an easy hire truck or a trailer, they would all perfectly fit in there. That was all designed. But as soon as, like, you know, did that, built the arcades, big projects and all that, and then, you know, got the community in and everything. But then, you know, it was succeeding, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be a bar manager. I don't want to like, I don't have to work the door. I don't want to have to fucking consistently keep rehashing like new themes for things. Like, but then that's what my job was for 5 years. And like by the end of it, there was no time or anything for me to do all like the video and like essentially the Geek Punk stuff. The Geek Punk is what I was trying to do that entire time, but didn't have any like spoons for it all until I just burnt out again. I completely burnt out. I'm like, I essentially got to a point where I'm like, to the other owner, I'm like, all right, do you want the company? Because if you want it, you can have it. I either you take it or I need to shut down because I can't even feel that I'm responsible for all this in some degree. And if I still am like an owner or something, I won't be able to
Right.
relax because I
Yeah.
want to work on it. I'll have that instinct to naturally do it. And if I don't, I'm like, I'm gonna fucking die if I keep this up.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
for real, like I built the whole place where I essentially was like, the functioning heart because I was the only not the one that was the connection to everyone, all these things. And for years I was trying to put a manager in or something that could take like the weight off, but it couldn't happen. I had no idea why this kept happening and became that. And with a bunch of other like instances in the past, I realized that this was a cycle that I kept doing and of like building something up and then it being something I needed to get away of, and then burning out and then getting away. I'm like, hold on, well, what is like the cause of this? And then figuring out this ADHD stuff. I'm like, oh, that's absolutely what it is. It's like, there's no way I could ever have built it up to something that I was gonna be able to keep working on, would be interested in. Because when you get ADHD and there's something you're just not interested in, it's like it's invisible to you. And
Yeah.
it could be right in front of you and you can know exactly every single thing that needs to happen for it, but you will not see it. You won't have any instinct to do it.
Yeah.
And then you hate yourself for it. Then you go and distract yourself with something else. And then at the end of that, then you completely forget, like when you're hyper focusing on something else. And then you come out of that hyper focus at the end, you're like, you're just left with shame when you realize all the other stuff that you didn't get done from it. And it was just this worse feeling of dread when you don't understand any of how or why that happened. And yeah, it's just wild. And it's you see it with a lot of other people. I see it with people constantly around me in the industry. Like everyone's got fucking ADHD.
If this was a video podcast, as you were describing all of those symptoms, it would have just been a slow push in on my face with my eyes getting wider and wider.
Oh my god!
Red in realization of like, oh no, this is like, I think this is me.
Well, because I know a lot of people who are like, it's like, but I like who I am. I like that I am. There's always I am this creative. I am all these things, and I'm worried that I wouldn't still be that stuff. It's like you're still you is the thing. It's just that you've been working with weights the entire time. And when you finally get on like meds or whatever, or whichever way you look at doing stuff, you realize that this is the hard thing to be able to explain to people. It's that the distance between thought, like idea, and action is hugely minimized between it. So you go like, oh, I need to send that email to this person about this thing to get an answer. And instead of just like getting used to the hummy and distracted, and then I got it done by midday kind of thing into it, you go, oh, I need to do that. All right, I'll just click it and send it and it's done.
Right.
And you're like, oh, wait, is that how other people have access to themselves? And you realize that you've been training with weights on your entire fucking life. And then all of a sudden you have access to your own capacity, your own actual skill, your own actual creativity, sort of like when you need it. Like I'd geared my entire life to like be as work well with my flow of creativity, which was like, I don't know when I'm going to have the best amount of clarity. So I need to be able to be ready to go like for a creative stint at any moment's notice. It might be 3 a.m. It might be 2 p.m. on a Friday, Saturday, who the fuck knows? But when I'm there and feel able to do it, I need to be ready to do whatever that thing is. And that might be totally fine for like a lot of people for a long while. But as you get to later in life, and you start seeing rises and falls and repetition of all these things that happen constantly, or even just like with relationships and stuff, like there will be ongoing effects that it really has a negative effect on. You might totally survive up until 40 or 50 or 60, who knows? But then by that point, you might realize that like, oh, hold on, I've been married and divorced 4 times and all this stuff. And like I haven't married and divorced 4 times, but like, I mean, without going too much of my personal life, like say one thing that I would hear a lot from my partners and that is that they like they couldn't get a lot of focus, out of me, and so they couldn't
Right.
necessarily see, they didn't know if I loved them necessarily, because they didn't know my
Right.
love language necessarily. I didn't understand my love language necessarily. I was more like, oh, it's like, well, if it's not working, then like, oh, it mustn't be the one. The one will be out there somewhere or whatever. It's like, no. They just didn't have the context, and I didn't have the context. I was still living
Right.
by what society tells you how relationships supposed to work and what all the rules are and everything. But as soon as you have context of like how your brain can veer off here or go over here, or how it works with attention, and you can start communicating that to people, you have a real shot.
Yeah. Huh.
Mm.
Man, yeah, like everything you're saying, I'm just like, yep, nope, that checks a box. That checks a like, even when it comes to like relationships, like I can remember like specifically just being like, well, I just don't think relationships are for me
Yeah.
because I
That's what I've been
just
majority. I'm
like
like years. I'm like 4 or 5 years in between relationships usually, because it's like I feel like I don't
right.
want to put this
Yeah.
on to people.
Well, yeah, and like for me, it's just like I was like what like last year before I was watching like one of the YouTube channels that I watch a lot of this guy's videos, and it was like a day in the life, and literally it's like, wake up, get ready for the day, with his partner, and then they both have their own YouTube channel, so they both leave the house, they go film their own stuff, whatever. Like he does skateboarding stuff, she does like tech vlog, like reviews stuff, and then they go about their day, and then they come back to the apartment at night, and they eat a meal together while editing videos, and like I was like, that seems like the perfect relationship.
Yeah.
Like barely interacting with each other, but being comfortable enough to be in the same room, like doing
Yeah.
your own separate thing,
Yeah.
like not needing to constantly like dote on each other and like be involved, right? Like,
Yeah.
a date here and there, like a dinner, share your evening together, but like being like able to just share silence like comfortably sounds like
Mhm.
the perfect thing to me. Is
Absolutely.
like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That to me as well is absolutely like the sign of that things are, I was actually saying to Sawyer over that not long ago, just over Discord, we're talking about that's the, that's the sweet spot when you can share like we can share nothing with someone entirely satisfactory, like in satisfaction. That's the one. Because I've had people who you'll think you're almost sharing a silence or whatever, but then I didn't realize that I was more just deep in a hyper focus. And it's the small things like that vlog may be all well and good, but it's the small things off camera where if someone doesn't feel that they've had enough, just sort of naturally enough attention throughout the day or whatever, and they want that from the other person, but if you're got that like blinders on thing, then that might be, one little feeling disregarded that adds to a pile. And then after like, however long, that could end up being a mountain of feeling disregarded in many things. And that sours other bits. And that comfortable silence now, it doesn't happen so often kind of thing. And it's like,
Yep.
those are the types
all of
of
my
things.
relationships have failed.
Well,
Literally,
everything
like,
is knowledge, like
yeah.
even relationships that don't work, it tells us a lot about ourselves and what we can provide and what we need ourselves.
Like I've definitely gotten better with it over the years, like identifying and like cutting it off like before it gets to that point. But like I can like very distinctly remember like my very first serious relationship was like to the point where it was like, she was like, can't you change like, the night you do this particular activity so that we can like spend time together? Because,
Mm.
my schedule's like, like this, and like your schedule, like, right. And like, this is like the one day that we could like have date night each week. And
Mm.
I was like, no, no, this
And you
is,
feel yourself being like quote unquote unreasonable in those times as well, and that like, sorry, I'll let you keep going. But
oh
yeah,
yeah, no, you're right.
like you can
Exactly.
feel it,
Like,
at the time. You're like, I sound like an asshole, and then so
yeah,
you just feel bad and you internalize it, even though you know that what you're like asking for, that space you're asking for, is hugely important to you, but it only will come off externally to people as like a selfish thing. They go, oh, when they play
Right.
WoW more, like
Yeah.
or something like that, because that's all it looks like outside of it. But
Right.
the
Now, in my
deeper
defense, the
conversation is
activity
totally different.
was the activity was band practice. Like there was like
Mhm.
four other people like
Yeah, you got
involved, but like
responsibilities, and
it
yeah,
was, but still, like, you know, thinking back on it with hindsight, you know, 2020, like the way I handled the situation was terrible. And I never even once considered asking the band, like, hey, can we, like, instead of
mm,
practicing from 6 to 10 at night, can we do like 1 to 4 in the
mm.
afternoon?
I mean,
Like, never. I was like, no, this is like what I established. And it was something where it's like, you know, I was in the band like before I started dating this girl. And I was like,
yeah,
well, this came first. Like, this has priority over you because, like, order of operations, right? Like, I got
mm,
involved in this first, so it is higher on the rank than the things that came after it, which
yeah,
is
because
probably, or not even probably, that's definitely not the way you should be treating people.
well,
People
hey, here's
aren't
the thing
like
though.
projects, you know?
People with ADHD, when things work for us, and we have especially when we have a routine
Hmm.
with something where things are working, and we feel like when we have this routine and this agreed upon thing that we can expect, we usually prepare ourselves mentally for that time, and we get into that loop of it, and we can succeed in those routines of
Right.
stuff. And it just seems externally as like, oh, you go to band practice and then you do band of this. It's like, well, yeah, but it's also one of an only repeatable sections of clarity where I can create and succeed that I can achieve. And coming up to those like natural routines with the right people and that are very difficult to do. And when you are locked into them, uh, altering that and letting it kind of still succeed and thrive is almost a near impossible thing to do. And you'll understand that internally because you're like, this is rare. Like what I'm doing here is rare for
Hmm.
me and means so much of that. And it's in those times actually where if there was a greater understanding, and it's, say if you are ADHD or whatever, um, that's actually like a thing where you needed support from your partner to be able to, if they understood that and saw that,
Right.
they might be like, oh, all right, well, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna make sure that he like, and those routines and stuff come up that he's able to do them, and then when you see that context, you can be okay. Well, then these other times here. Well, it could have been like, all right, well, let's find a way to make a new routine where we do something which is gonna fulfill those things in the relationship that she needs, and you can both like express like your same love language with each other in those times where you're able to most thrive. But
Yeah.
when you don't have the words for those things because you don't have the knowledge of yourself or the situation or even like the hindsight, all you're left with is, as you said, hi hi hindsight's 2020. I did it wrong. i I was wrong. I should have given up these times. Like you only had those tools, so you can only see it with those tools as well.
Right.
But you weren't wrong. Like they needed something, but you also needed something. And so it's never as simple as it
Oh
seems.
yeah. And I don't
Mm,
necessarily, like, in my particular situation, and you know, I say this more for like anybody listening who is like strongly identifying with this. I don't think I was necessarily, I think the way I handled it was wrong. I don't think my feelings were necessarily wrong,
mm,
but I definitely could have, you know, worked to meet her halfway. But again,
yeah.
like we're talking like this is like my first serious relationship. I was in high school. How
Mm.
many like 16-year-olds have like the foresight to be
Mhm.
like, you know,
No,
like
100%.
yeah, like no, when you're like 16, you're like, you know, and it's a learning experience, right? Like it is
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that now
But
I
that
can look
whole
back on
thing,
that and be better to a future partner.
yeah,
But
yeah,
like,
yeah. That whole
you know,
scenario though is totally like repeatable in lots of different ways in people's lives.
right.
And like it doesn't matter if necessarily it's like a teenage thing. Once again, you'll see these like um repetition and things that will happen, like patterns like throughout your life where these sort of things continually happen. And eventually what does happen is, if not, oh, I know better now and I know more and I could handle it better, what most often I found, well, this happens with me, is that I would avoid relationships in general.
Yep.
or I would avoid situations where I had proven to myself I would let this person down. Or it would be like, because a lot of relationships at the end where I feel like all I would end up feeling like is like, I feel like I'm just a negative force in your life. Like all the problems that you're having right now, I only see as me being the cause of. So then, therefore, henceforth, the way to make you feel better, the way to love you correctly, is to not be that negative force in your life, because that's what I saw it as like a negative force. And then, but that also happens with things like jobs. Like, you know, I was be like, oh, I can't be reliable enough to work for this person or company or whatever, because they might see all these things that I do and these creative stuff and how much I can take like a progress through to a project through to completion. But if they want to hire me to be able to do that for them, if I'm not interested in their thing, would be the worst fucking employee ever. And so then I would eventually, it would lead me to like stop applying for jobs, to not have any confidence that I could even go for a job or do something. I'm like, oh, I can't do that, whatever. But then people would look at like my resume or something and go, you're like overqualified. Of course you could do this, mate. No, trust me, I can't. Like, you'll hate me if I work for you. And you know, once again, I had no context for why, but that was where I had been led to. And then now that, you know, I'm 35 and so far along in this, and it's still only 2 years from like diagnosis of ADHD, I'm still like working on trying to find what those answers are that I can sort of fit within society or other people's sort of things in a correct way that aren't just me making concessions for myself, and not just me saying, oh, I have ADHD. Like, you know, I want to be able to do those things. I want to be able to give people what they need and do all those sorts of things. But finding where I fit in with this knowledge is tremendously difficult. Like, I'm very lucky that I've done enough sort of like bits and pieces around that I have like a track record that when people usually hire me for something, they're hiring me to do a Skaidris.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like if we hire Skadris for something, it's because we want something that we know he would be interested in. Is like where I've sort of gotten into some things, which is like, thank God.
Yeah, and I think that is, you know, very important for creatives, and definitely like, I think, you know, a final thought as we go to our mid-show break here. I think it's very important, again, for anybody who like is feeling like this or whatever. I think it's, you know, something where, you know, you don't want to just say, oh yeah, it's ADHD, or it's like this whatever diagnosis, and like, you know, use it as like a crutch. Like, it using those things as like a way to reframe what it is that you want to do, so that you can do what you want, right? Like, I may not be explaining that properly.
I've got the perfect explanation of that. I've got the nugget for them to lead on to for a little break here. It's not an excuse, it's an explanation.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it just helps you kind of slot in to how to most effectively achieve what you want. Because if you're constantly battling your brain, you're not working at peak efficiency.
Yeah.
Right?
And if you're constantly trying to explain or translate your intention versus your action to someone else while still trying to do that battle, that's often the worst thing, is trying to explain yourself, you know?
Right.
And it's a huge struggle, especially if you don't have that context, which is just so important.
Exactly.
Yourself, yeah.
So we're gonna go listen to a few ads, everybody. And then when we come back, we'll be continuing our conversation with Skadris of the GeekPunks. Enjoy these ads. Don't skip them. Listen to them. I need the 1 penny per ad view. If you like this podcast and would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Folsham_art. As little as $1 per month, you not only support Thought Balloons and get to submit questions to be answered by myself and the guest host, but you will also have access to my webcomic 3 to 4 weeks before they're released to the public and my weekly update blog. At higher tiers, you'll gain access to full issues and short story comics, and you can even see progress and add input to projects I'm working on. That's patreon.com/FOULSHAM_ART to support Thought Balloons today. Do you want to class up your gaming? Are you sick of card tables and cheap plastic sleeves for your character sheets? Do you like real wood and are convinced magnets are the only magic we have left in our current age of science? Then head over to legendcraft.ca to spruce up your tabletop gaming setup. They offer felt top gaming tables with add-ons like cup holders, tablet holders, dice trays, roll boxes, and more. Newly released in January 2021 is their Magna Tracker system. With versions for both health and spell tracking, these sleek and stylish tracking boards come with magnetized tracking pips that allow you to slide them back and forth along clean-cut channels, making tracking your health and spell slots easy to use and read, all without the constant erasing and writing on your character sheet. And did I mention that both the Magna Trackers and the tables are customizable and personalizable? That's right. Your table and or Magna Tracker will be one of a kind when you order at Legendcraft. Legendcraft is partnering with me to offer you a 5% discount on your orders at legendcraft.ca. That's right, you can get a 5% discount when you enter the code F_ART at checkout. That's F_art. Go to legendcraft.ca. That's legendcraft.ca with discount code F_art for 5% off. Legendcraft.ca. Order today. And welcome back from the break, everybody. We are still sitting here with Skaidris of the GeekPunks. We are having just a great conversation. Literally just during the break, like we talked for another like 10,
hold on, we gotta record this.
Yeah, literally had to be like, oh, hey, before we get like too far into this, I gotta hit that record button again. But I was, we mentioned like your events managing stuff just in the course of the conversation earlier. There was something that I did want to ask you, and I've asked you this like when you were like streaming and stuff, but like I wondered if there's like more to this story now that we have like a forum in which to just freely talk where you don't have to. I got you all to myself. I can ask you the real questions. I don't got to worry about the rest of the people in chat. Someone that you've worked with who has actually done some stuff for you on the GeekPunks channel is someone that I have met once in my life, and I thought he was a really cool dude. And that is MC Lars. I saw him in concert with the Aquabats back in like 2005, 2006. And after the show, like I in a band myself at that time, and like I always like tried to wait like outside like near the buses or whatever to like meet the bands and stuff like afterwards. And I got to meet the Aquabats, I got to meet MC Lars. Just a real great group of guys.
Yeah, they're so positive and just like open and loving to people and stuff.
And see, that's exactly what I want to ask you is like, I know because he's like, I know Lars is like recorded stuff like to the GeekPunks theme song, right? And so since you have like a I got to assume a closer working relationship with Lars than me as like a 15, 16-year-old kid just being like, hey, I really liked your set, man. Like, like how much of like is he just like a genuinely cool dude? Because like he seems like he'd be like a genuinely cool dude.
Yeah, if you ever see him like in interviews or anything and he's just got that really positive attitude, that's like what he is, like 100%. Like, and he's so open to like collaborate with people and everything. The way I met Lars was I had it was like this. It was a podcast I was hosting years ago. called The Revenge of the Nerd, and I was essentially, it was an excuse to contact people that I wanted to just have a conversation with. And I talked to a few people, and I contacted him, and he was like, "Yep, sure," because I was really into nerdcore. Well, what has he likes to be defined as post-punk laptop rap.
Right.
And I did like a little interview with him in that, and I was like, "Oh, hey, you should come to Australia and do a gig or whatever. I might be able to hook you up with a venue or something." And he's like, yeah, I got family there. I'm in Melbourne all the time. And
Nice.
so I was working at a gaming bar at that point, and then when he was next coming to Melbourne to see like his family, he asked about if it had like a place to play. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. Like I wasn't even in town, but I got him I set him up with a gig at the bar I was at, and and I went to see another gig when I was in town there and met him at that. And then I've been getting him to play a few gigs when he would come into town, and also when I would travel overseas for like PAX and stuff at the game, I bumped into him like a number of times. And I hooked up with Frontalot, MT Frontalot, who's the godfather of nerdcore, the rap as well. And a few other nerdcore. Protoman, the Mega Man, like metal opera band. Like I set up a gig with Frontalot and Protoman in Australia, at the Evelyn Hotel, which is like an infamous sort of like rock, like live venue sort of club in Fitzroy. And they killed it there. And ever since then, I'm actually so fucking glad I did that, because I was a massive fan. I was so excited, like pulling that off and getting to be in the crowd for it, and they're helping them out with like their tour. And they now, whenever I go to PAXs, because they got a tight relationship with the PAX crew, they'd play like every PAX that they put on. Essentially, they always get flown around for those on the Saturday. They always have the gig day, and it was like no matter where I went for those things, I would have like this my American family there. Of like literally, it was like, I'd be so far away, not know anyone, and I would see them and Lars and Frontalot are just like arms open, like Skaidris, like run and grab me and just be like, no, everything. And it was like just like you find people in like geek musician scenes in particular are just fucking amazing, just lovely people. And like, because if you're in a geek scene for something, it means that you're a part of like a fan base. You've done that.
Right.
You've done escapism before. You've been in a position when you've needed escapism before, and you've been a fan before. And so when you have an innate understanding of people that like will gather around you are there because this is something they love, and like so they have that great sort of dynamic between them, like a common understanding.
Well, it's the positive effects of the psychological effect called tribalism, right? It's like it's an in group, and like you have a basis of like experiences.
Being out of the tribe for so long becomes a tribe itself.
Yeah. But like it's you have common factors and stuff, so it's like easy to relate to people and like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's definitely good to hear like because like I've met like some other people, other bands. Not gonna mention any names because I don't want to like trash people, but like you can definitely tell like when the musician or like whatever is just sort of like suffering the like meet and greet at the end of the show versus like the people who are like just legit like, yeah, cool, thanks for like showing up, like I appreciate people like coming out and stuff. It's like it's good to hear that like Lars is like definitely like a solid dude, because like I pegged him as a solid dude like when I like talked to him for like that 10
positive.
minutes, but
I've talked to other musicians who have like, I've been like, oh, I'm friends with Lars, and they're like grown. And I'm like, oh, what's that about? It's like just purely because he's so positive and just like like he'd be overwhelmingly nice. But that's that's why we love him. 100%.
Right. Yeah. And that's like another thing is like weird, like just like something that I like, especially like, and I don't know, maybe you can corroborate or like disconfirm this, but like when I was like first getting started out, like moving beyond just playing like school dances and stuff and like starting to travel to like neighboring towns and things and like playing shows,
Mm.
there's like this weird sort of elitism that you run into like in the music scene. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, like, you guys are playing like clubs, like in air quotes, like these venues, these clubs that are like church basements in like
Mhm.
farming countries, and like you're pretending that you're so much better than everybody else because you're in a band. Like, what the fuck, man? Like,
I mean,
what, like, what is that? Like, why
there,
do
there's
like,
cert-
musicians think they're so much better than
there
everybody
certainly
else?
is and can be that, but I think a large part of it is that when someone's touring and on the road, or like they're just doing like the gig scene or something, they're what that experience is for them is entirely different to probably what the reality of the energy they bring to a show is at any given time. And so a lot of it can just be like they might be fighting with the club promoter or whatever who's refusing to pay them, or like they're realizing like, shit, I need to go home and pay all these things and have all these like stressful things sort of, you know, happen and go on. And it's like their reality of that situation can be so entirely different that they might be young enough that they don't or they haven't, just generally, doesn't matter how young they are, learned the lesson that like, hold on, this is like a really important moment right now, especially like for your career, is to just have that be open with like the people that might be showing interest in like your art and what you're doing, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you and keep you going. But like that circuit that people at that time can just completely take you over, because that the people that they're talking to and like and would be there around them at that time, that elitism might actually just be, these are the few other people that I know who are going through the same thing. And so you'll have a more of a natural, easy sort of a like relationship with other people that are doing that thing. But then when other people want to kind of join in that energy as like, no, I'm here for you as well, it's hard to switch into that gear. Like I'm doing like club promotion stuff, like with like Beta Bar. People would come up to me and like want to have a conversation, but they would they'll come up and I okay, here's the thing, like I'm really bad at communicating with people, especially when I didn't know that I'm like expecting it. And I would have people that would come up that knew like some things about me, and they'd be like, oh hi, da, da, da. And I'll go, oh hi, and I thought I would be meeting someone new and say like, oh hey, my name's Skaidris. I think they'll go like, oh, I know, and then just keep talking or asking me about something, and I'm like, you didn't say your name, like, and I at that point they're saying they're talking to me so commonly that like it's almost rude for me to ask, and then without those few things for me to start engaging that person, I can't connect. I cannot connect the conversation. I've got nothing to talk. I don't want to just talk about me. Otherwise, it's like I'm just having a conversation about me the whole time, and I need to have something. And at that point, it can be like I'm babysitting someone. Like I don't know how to get this conversation because I'm so awkward. I don't know how to do anything about this. And so a lot of time you're left standing there kind of silent, like stunned and waiting for them to finish talking. And then they finish talking and then they've just listed off a bunch of facts about things that you both know, but they're also simultaneously, they've just become blind to the fact that they're not even actually talking to you on a real level. And most musicians, if or any performer as a quote unquote celebrity or just someone that's known that would have people come up to them, if you're able, like that's why you hear it as this advice a fair bit, is like, if you could just talk to them like a normal person and they know that you don't have like a glimmer in your eye and focusing it on them or just giving them compliments, they'll probably open right the fuck up. Like as soon as that they see that, oh, this is someone just talking to me. Like if this is someone talking to where I feel like I could comfortably say, this fucking promoter is trying to dog us, da, 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 and then that you know that person will engage with that conversation at the level you're in at that time, then you would more willingly give it. But if you know someone's about to divert you off into some other thing, you're like, I can't do that. Like because I'm currently in this other situation, and a lot of that comes off to people as that like elitism and stuff for it. But there also
like I get like when it happens like with like an audience member or like a fan or something, but like there are some like There's like some people, and like thinking back to it, it's like usually the singer or like the lead guitar player. Like, and it's
Famously,
like
yeah.
in the green room, like there's like another band playing, like we're hanging out like backstage. You would think like band to band that they would be like more like reciprocal of conversation and stuff, but they'd just be,
Yeah.
and I
It's
don't know, maybe
probably
it's like
all that stuff
pre-gig and they're
plus
just like in
time.
the zone or whatever, but
Yeah.
like, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Or
always
like,
so weird to me, just like we're both here, we're both doing the same thing, and like
yeah.
you're being a dick. And I could
I
never
reckon
figure that out.
maybe that like you know, if there's only certain people that you can relate to, um, and some that you can't do for so long, and they don't learn ways of coping and drawing the bridge between those things. After a while, it becomes not just a habit, but not just a pattern, but a habit, and the way you
Yeah. Yeah.
naturally treat things, because they're probably like, if I don't bother caring, then I won't have to challenge myself, or I don't have to fall into some of these known traps, and so they just give up,
And it's one of
which
the
is a
huge
pitfall we all kind of
reasons.
fall into. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's one of the bigger reasons why I like really got into the ska scene back in like the mid 2000s is because like 9 times out of 10, like people in ska bands are just genuinely like really awesome, like nice
People that
people.
want to
Like,
bring that energy as well, because
yeah,
that energy is about getting everyone together, like full dancing. Ska is dancing, you know,
yeah,
and like having that energy. And if you get into a career where you're producing that and actively want to, you probably have those better social skills,
right.
and natural inclination to want to like get people talking and happy and moving. I reckon like it's weird how you know, tightly a music genre will reflect some of those just more base human things that we all sort of have in ourselves, I think.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like the group that I was like that I called like my band, like where I did a lot of the songwriting and stuff. Like we had like some harder elements, we had some lighter elements, and so like we could play, you know, with just like, you know, heavy metal groups, hard rock groups, like hardcore groups, ska bands, you know, like we were like in this weird sort of like middle section, and it's just so weird like how like, and like on some level like get it, but like it's so weird how like some hardcore bands specifically could be like just aggressive people.
Mm,
Just like
mm.
very weird, you know. But then like on the other hand, I've also met some hardcore bands who that's how they like get rid of those emotions and are
Yeah,
genuine this awesome cool people to be around. But
100%.
like
Yeah,
it's
like
just so
and
weird to like
it's
that
totally
world.
common where like, you know, you are like different people. It's very common, and I mean, we don't have to always all be like that, but it's easy. It's understandable. Um, like if you're like, if you have a depression, if you're history like with depression, and you can really express and kind of get something out through like an aggressive music style or whatever, then, you know, there's more chance that that person is gonna end up in making that stuff professionally, and then that also means
Yeah.
they've got depression and all that, and they go into an industry with a lot of stress and all that on, then and maybe they have more access to vices or things that help them not completely face those things, they'll fall apart. And that's why you find the people that, you know, like post career rockers who finally say that they just went and got therapy,
Mhm.
because they were treating it the only way they thought they knew or could do it in. And then they're like, oh, they make massive recoveries. It's just you never went to therapy in the first place. But at least like mental health is far more part of the dialogue in people's lives growing up these
Right.
days. And so
It
like I'm
really
thinking
is.
a lot of that really is sort of like we're seeing a part of a relic of like the old sort of scene and world, and that where we're people growing up
Yeah.
now have sort of more of a base understanding of how important, like you see a lot of like metal and hardcore bands and that now, a lot of the sort of the overarching themes that you see in them is sort of like brotherhood, and sort of like which is another way of, you know, saying like, are you okay, like men supporting men in ways that they societally probably haven't easily been let to because of just saying it's better to show bravado, being tough before it is be like looking out for your mate more than like I will kill for you, I would murder, who are we murdering, I'm on your side, like, you know, who has to die because I love you, like, you know, there's a little more depth in our support now. I think that we can idolize, because there are absolutely a lot of new bands coming up now that aren't afraid to show how important that is.
Man, you know, for all of like the weird shit that we have to put up with living in this current time, like that's definitely like a positive trend, you know, because like one of like the huge you know, things that like I'm hoping, like, you know, when I start therapy here soon, because like I know I need it, like one of the big things, you know, we were talking about earlier, like being put on medication and like the worry of like, am I still going to be able to create and all that kind of stuff. Like that's a huge thought distortion that our society like places on artists. Like think of all the times that like they talk about like the oh, like what, like the what's the term, like the depressed artist, or like, you know what I'm talking about, like like
Totally.
you know, like the, you know, you have to like suffer to create art and all that stuff. Is like they kind of like, it's just like a thing, you know, like Van Gogh cut off his ear because he was so depressed and disturbed, and like it's how you make good art, and like
that so is like what they would always palm off as a thing, but all that is describing is that's society's unlearned idiot advice for saying that, like, if you don't understand elements of your surrounding because people are telling you it's elsewise, you will create things to try and one, communicate with others how you're feeling and what you're doing and to get it out. Two, to like one, to communicate with others, and other, to like just express yourself to yourself and trying to make some sort of understanding, and to like feed once again just dopamine. Like, you know, if you don't have dopamine, they're just trying to make that dopamine themselves. But that doesn't mean if you then didn't have dopamine you wouldn't be able to create. That is the opposite, because the hardest part is, and that we learn sort of naturally through a lot of this, is you learn the drive to be able to create. But then if you, like, you know, sort things out and are happy and are comfortable and can get dopamine, you know, just to talk about just very blatantly chemically, you will then, you know how to do it then, but then you'll have the neural pathways to access to want to do it, to come up with those ideas.
right.
Like, I am, when I'm most happy, when I'm most like at comfort and not stressing about things, I will create the best art ever. I will be my funniest. I will be able to engage with people. I'll be able to think clearly, and I'll like want to do those things. I want to collaborate with other people. I'll reach out to people for those things because I won't be like self-doubting myself or anything. And like to add on top of that, like the like to draw it directly more to like ADHD, through like the 90s, where it became a big thing about like, you know, ADHD in children, they started writing the book on it and everything. They would like, especially in Australia, there was a real, like, you could see what America was doing. You could see all those pharmaceutical companies overprescribing and making sure that, you know, every kid was put on these things, right?
Yeah.
And there was almost like an ego thing here, but well, we're not going to do that to our kids. We're not going to just drug them up like over in the States, whatever. And so sort of culturally, you have all these doctors that are still around from the 90s who still have that mindset of that, looking into a medication, even especially with adults. Like, you know, when they wrote the book on it, because popularly they were talking about kids, or especially young cis male boys, because the way, if you need dopamine and you're a young boy who societally knows that they can hit things with a stick, run around, do the boys will be boys, they'll get that by doing those types of things, which are loud, which are this. But like, there are whole generations of women who were not diagnosed with ADHD because it looks completely different in women. But they wrote the book on what it looks like as young boys. And so, like, here, only just like a few months ago, my medication I need for my ADHD was only just now being covered, like being seen by the medical institution as something that's used for ADHD. I had to pay $130 a month for my medication. and it's now gone down to $35 because they've just put it on the list of like, okay, it can be this. But there's still, you have to fight against the doctors and diagnoses themselves a lot of the time, because they have just like, they've already resigned in the back of their mind that they're beyond it. No, that's pathetic. You don't need to do that. And having to deal with that as someone who's already struggled with people telling you that, you know, you're lazy, oh, you're not doing this, oh, you're able to do that, and you've convinced yourself of that already, that's the worst possible attitude you could come up against. But now that, like, with the, you know, the internet and people in forums and groups and people finding each other and being able to hear other people's stories from it, they're realizing that this is, you can see how much it's blatant and it's clear, it's everywhere. And yeah, and so like the really sad, this is just to touch on women being misdiagnosed, and that like it's actually so fucking depressing, because they would suffer from ADHD just as much, and they're just as prevalent to have it. But the real fucking crime is that it drives me fucking mad, that if when they go to a psychiatrist or like a doctor, chances are if they're going to treat them for it, they'll treat them for bipolar. And I've known many women in my life before I was diagnosed that were treated with bipolar, where I'm like, that doesn't feel like it's correct. Like, I know you don't just like swing into these things. Like, it's a clear, like, things happen that lead it into these, but then, you know, they take the word of a doctor and then they'll get treated fucking antipsychotics, which will make you psychotic if you don't need them for something. And they're like horribly detrimental to your body. And it's like, yo, they just fucking needed a little bit more access. Like, you know, it's all the things that it stumbles in your life, them trying to fit into what they're supposed to, and not having an understanding and not having those same connections with themselves to be able to enact what they think people want from them. That struggle is what makes them depressed. Their inability to be what you keep thinking and telling them they should be is what's making them angry. And or trying to be partners to people in ways that, and having expectations of them that are unrealistic for them in these times, is the worst. And like, you don't need medication for ADHD, but you do need understanding. Like, you know, you do need people around you who grasp exactly where your limits and everything is, and not judge you poorly for that. Like, until you can pull yourself, like, you know, to fully be able to realize and live that thing. But the problem is, there's so many late diagnosed people who just weren't diagnosed as kids, and then who are now figuring out on their own terms that we have entire lives of unstitching opinions of ourselves that we've like even accepted. Like, you know, I'd accepted my failings on all this stuff in situations where I failed in the past, and I believed I failed other people, or I took other people's words that I was a bad person or something. And then having to, like, as a 35-year-old person, having to go through and face that shit and analyze and be able to not only see and, you know, for the context of what it is, but then believe it and have that sink into who you are as a person, and with confidence, and what do you do with that information? That's how it's a ridiculous amount of stuff to do. Like, where do you start? But you start with starting, you know.
Exactly. The only place to begin is the beginning. You know, and it's definitely like, man, like that is exactly how like I've been feeling this last few months doing the Noom program. Like the Noom app is like, you know, it's a weight loss thing, but it's more than that. It's like, it's weight loss via psychology. Like, it's like, I have 32 years of just terrible habits relating to food. Not just like, you know, it's not just like, oh, like I'm addicted to, you know, like gummy bears, or like I can't kick the fast food. It's not that. It's like just the whole like not understanding, like something so simple that they teach you like in the first 2 weeks of like, you know, the app is like, what is the difference between body hunger, where you actually need to eat food to like survive and get like the calories you need, versus mouth hunger, where it's just like, I want to taste something, right? Versus emotional hunger, versus like just being bored, like just knowing like there are different types of hunger and you can get rid of that psychological feeling like I need to eat food to fill this like need. Like there are different ways to go about like getting it. Like it's such a huge thing, but like it's actually implementing it and like learning it and accepting that is like I started this program back in like October, and like that was one of the first lessons, and I'm only just now like starting to really internalize just that first lesson, because it's
huge.
30 years of different coping mechanisms and stuff that just don't like jive with like what's real,
like during on the break when we just had like a little bit of conversation, I was talking about how before I sort of diagnosed had my diagnosis and everything, the amount of time it would take for me to wake up from waking up, say it was on a 9 to 5 and I get up like 8 a.m. it'd be about 1 p.m. until I would feel like I was actually it was me, like it was my brain and I was not just a zombie. Like, and in that time before, what I would be doing is anything that would give me some form of dopamine in a routine that was repeatable. So like obsessively watching something, like, I'd be on the next series. I'd constantly like be churning through entire seasons of stuff. Like my whole life I've watched more media than should be physically possible. I'd be do that. I'd be eating drinking energy drinks like you wouldn't fucking believe. Soda, like drinks. I'm always have like drinks and stuff in my house because like essentially the caffeine. Like I need the caffeine and sugar. I was medicating myself with sugar and things that make you feel good and provide you with some dopamine because that's what I don't have in me to function. And I can't see straight unless I don't. And yet, but all that looks like to other people is this person eats shit, doesn't work, and sleeps all the time, And it's like, and that's all you can take from that as well at that time. Like right now, since we've been talking, I'm on my second energy drink. I'm still going down, and that's a habit that I'm still can't kick because as much as my meds like do work and that, I'm still coming out of a massive fucking depressive episode and I require more I slip into more of my coping and like safety things that help me get through them. Like the thing, here you go, the massive depressive episode thing was because last year, like during the COVID pandemic, we had lockdown and everything, I was my doctor just before it all started, my therapist was prescribing me my medication for ADHD. He's like, oh, I'm going on long service leave, but I'm going to write you like, a long prescription, like 6 or 7 months worth, so you'll be fine. And then it comes down to like the 6 or 7 month point, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to book my like new appointment in, and they're like, oh, he's like retired amid all this pandemic stuff. I'm like, oh, well, my prescription's like out. What do I do? He's like, oh, well, do you have another doctor or something? He's like, oh no, they don't have any availability at the moment. You'll have to go find another doctor and get your meds. I'm like, oh, and will that be a thing where you guys can talk and I can just like go and see them and get the medication or whatever? Like, no, you'll need to go and be like re-diagnosed and everything and that. I'm like, excuse me?
What?
As but I am this. I've been diagnosed. Like, you guys know this. And it's like, well, yeah, but you've got to do it with them now. I'm like, and so I had gone from being on my medication, which allowed me to have access to myself and get to a point where I could count on having access to myself to a certain degree in that, to flat out not having it anymore. Every single day I would have medication. It doesn't matter if I was doing something or not. Every single day I would have it. And then not having it, I had my brain that I did before, but every relationship or even conversation or with streaming, this happened mid like streaming with GeekPunk. I couldn't rely on any of anything for myself for that. And for people what knew me through like, through the computer as we're in lockdown, like they, I wasn't able to lock in. I wasn't with them. I wasn't able to ask for help. I wasn't able even to receive help with them properly. Like you would hear like, I'd speak about it a lot on stream, and people would reach out and say that, you know, we're here for all those things. I was like, yeah, they may be that, and they may even do exactly what I need to do from them, but I can't say the words to them that would make that happen, because that is once again, that's a huge thing to do, like, you know, and that sort of connection. And it wasn't until the end of last year and Christmas time where like the lockdown thing had sort of eased a little bit enough that I was able to see people for the first time pretty much the entire year. And I got to see my parents, and we went to like my sister's place to see my nieces just for Christmas. And on the way back, I was like, I was bawling my eyes out in my glasses. I'm like, I need to tell them I need help. But like, they knew, like, you know, I'm struggling with stuff, and they would help you like here and there with stuff. But each time it was always sort of met with like advice on what you'd need to do. Oh, you need to do this. Oh, well, you need to do that. And the thing is, my problem is I don't not know what I need to do. My problem is I know exactly what I need to do. I'm incapable of doing it.
Yeah,
I can't do it. And I know every single list of all these things that are wrong with me, but I've gotten, you know, so far along in being, you know, an adult and a human, and, you know, quote unquote functioning in other people's eyes and masking all these problems, that I realized I'd gotten so good at talking people down from helping me, because I could mitigate. I could say how bad everything is and say every single fact of the matter, but then the way I would say it so confidently, or, you know, with enough bass tone in my tone, you know, and with knowledge, and that they'd be like, well, he's clearly on top of it more than I am, kind of thing. But it was like, no, I need your help. And so I was like, I can't get out of this car unless they know, until they know, like, to that degree. And so I was like, when it happened, like, they go, oh, well, you need a healthcare card and you should do this. And I was like, I literally had to be really wrong. I'm like, stop. I'm like, anything you're about to tell me now that's other than, yes, we will help you do A, B, and C of what I've asked for, is wrong. And you will have a drastically wrong. It means you do not understand how functional I am, period. Right. I need you to do nothing except help me in these 3 ways, which was, I need help booking with the doctor. I need help getting to that appointment directly, not, call that. I need you to physically get me there. It's like, and I need you to like not do like not just like say these things. I need you to do this. I'm like, oh, I won't be around. Like, I won't. It's like, because I can't do these things. And it had gotten to that point, especially with like lockdown, that like any natural routine or something that I would eventually, like, you know, oh, you know, once a week I might be able to exercise myself, and then that's enough to get by. With the lockdown like last year or whatever, like, you know, that just erased all stability that I would be able to do, or like with that for it.
Yeah. And
so all I really had was hyper focusing on things, and I wasn't able to, like, you know, my stream was always a very high production, and that was something I really enjoyed, and was experimenting with the format of streams and like putting all this work in and doing this stuff. I had no capacity for that whatsoever anymore. And so then like the views dip in that, and it was like, well, hold on, but the streaming was my that was one of my ways of self-medicating, was getting that adrenaline and stuff from it, and having that community right there to sort of converse with. But then I would go live, and it was like the hardest thing was just to go live, because then you're like, well, what do I do when I get on? And what if I can't do a thing? And you just sit there and you just don't go on. You worry about it like all day, and you're like, well, I'll just play games. I'll just play games then, because I know I'll be fine if I distract myself with playing games. And then it's the end of the day, and you've been playing games all day, and you're like, well, why don't I just stream me playing the game all day? That's what I do anyway. Like, it would have been fine, but then I don't do it. But then that will happen for like weeks. And like, well, I haven't done anything because I've been stuck in my head, because like, and that's what executive functioning is. Like, and it's really not something that's easily communicatable, especially with how severe it is, or how like you get tripped up on yourself. But like all my previous anything that I would have had as a coping mechanism before, it may have been unhealthy, but would have got me to survive like pre-medic diagnosis, and that just I didn't have set up anymore, you know. And I knew they were unhealthy regardless. I had that knowledge. And so it was just the worst. It was absolutely worst. And I only now, like literally like this week have I been like opening up OBS on this new computer to set it up with like all these old graphics and bits and stuff that we'd created. last year. There was no reason why I couldn't use them.
Right.
I mean, my stream has been really bare for the past however many months, for all this year pretty much. But I just now had been literally yesterday. I opened up a bunch of like highlight reels that I'd cut together and funny transitions and bits and
are we
like
gonna
shout
see
outs
the
from Major
return of the
Grunge
Megazord?
and yeah, Megazord bits and all that, all those like bits and pieces that, and I was looking at them and I was like laughing. I'm like, this is great. I'm like, why don't I just have these back in? Like, but the thing is, like, I couldn't see them. I couldn't see them anymore, like because I had fallen out of. I got so used to being able to just produce more and putting more out there that the idea of going back and having old ones in and that was like, I don't see that because of why would I do that? And then I was just thinking like, yeah, I'll make something new. I'll make the new thing. But to get to the point where I was you know, it took a long time of support and being medicated and slowly bringing myself up to be able to do that stuff. And it had all completely just been wiped. And yeah, it was pretty fucking shit.
It's definitely like something that's encouraging for me, and I hope that it's like encouraging for people listening that are going through the same thing. Is like I feel so much of what you were saying is like, you know, I work myself and like I worked like on like these really complicated projects until I get to this point of where it just can't do it anymore. And then I like disappear for an indeterminable amount of time, you know.
So you're recharging, you have to, but it just feels like
yeah.
you're failing at that time.
Like currently, like I'm working on like this big production that I'm gonna put on for, you know, my RPG show that I do on Saturdays. Is like I'm moving away from 5th edition D&D. I'm like doing a new system, so I'm like learning like the ins and outs of the system, right? And like on top of like everything I need to learn to like actually run the game is like the game master. Like I'm running a module for the first time instead of writing my own stuff, which is affording me the foresight as to like what this season is going to be like. And I've been like I've drawn like 34 background images to like, oh, you're gonna go to the engine room of the spaceship. Well, here's a picture of the engine room to like know like where you are, right? Like so like 34 images. Like I've got like a dozen to like a dozen and a half like video things that I want to do, because there's like parts where it's like when the characters interact with this NPC, read this, you know, like here's a script. And I was like, well, instead of me just reading that, let me make like a talking head, like little animation, right? And like I'm putting in like so much of this work that like I was like telling you during the break, like 2 weeks ago I'd like, you know, I self-medicated with some substances and then got way overstimulated hanging out with friends during that, you know, particular time, and then did not talk to anyone for a week. And I spent time, I read 144 issues of Invincible in 6 days while like sleeping for 4 hours, getting up, you know, smoking weed, reading Invincible until I was tired and took another 4-hour nap before I got up and smoked weed and read Invincible. And I did that for 6 days straight. And I'm only just coming out of that. Like, you know, I'm still not back to my 5 days a week stream schedule. Like I'm about 3 days a week. And it's just,
it's funny because
hard,
like all that of what you described to me is like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. Like when you like the initial you know say dosing yourself, that would have been you get to a point where you need to express and forcibly I need to see differently. Like I need to see differently. And I need to get out of my headspace now, and I know that I'm driven myself into a fucking wall of like a rut. And then all I hear was then at that point, you know, overstimulus is absolutely a thing. And when you have a lot of like, you know, you're taking in a lot of reality in different ways when you're coming out of one, you kind of have this hangover from it, where at the end you then sort of need everything to be quiet, bring all the stimulus down, put it down to like just one focus, one thing. You're just going to be sitting there and tickling your interest for a while, because in the back of your mind you will have an ocean of thoughts in your subconscious that are just sort of like that they're all set in a certain way. You know, you got a bunch of little bricks, and then you got too stuck. They're getting moldy and they're getting cracky and shit. So you throw them up in the air, and then like when they're up in the air, like, you know, the things that were most heavy or most important to you, they're slowly going to come down. You got to start to realize exactly how important, where they live in your life, and what you want to be able to do with this knowledge in your subconscious. And then the things that are kind of like you just don't care about, or that were stressing you out at that point, usually just fade away, because they have no sort of point in your life, and you shook them out really. And like at that time that you normally have to do that is just a time of recovery, a time of sort of like quiet, sort of just doing what you can and feeding you know, whatever media or advice you use to you know, make yourself feel okay is what you do for that. And you know, like it is self-medicating, and that whole process, that's happened to me many times. And that whole cycle of what you described, when that happens to me, those usually are the most important and helpful cornerstones that happen in my life. Yeah. Because if you get stuck in a life where you are unconsciously damaging yourself to the point that you do that, then that process will allow you to, for a moment, be slightly unbiased on yourself, because we are by definition biased of ourselves and our reality. And when we get stuck into it, we can't see it anymore because we're biased. And so if our brain is different for a while, we can view ourselves in retrospect differently to some degree. And if we're talking to like the people that we used to talk to and everything, like during that time when our brain is different, you know, we're taking all sorts of different information at that point and different factors. And and then you just gotta that part after, where it's sort of like that you lay down what's important to you after, and that sort of weak bit of sort of being calm and meditative. It's meditation at that point. But it's how you know, can just do it without, you know, knowledge of meditation technically.
And it's interesting, like you talk about, like you throw all the stuff up in the air and slowly the heavier, more important things come back to you first.
Yeah, you'll like, let things that are bullshit go away.
Yeah, and like, you know, it's something is really interesting because like when I went into like starting all the artwork for like Spaceship Zero, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have all these assets prepared, and everything's gonna be ready to go before we even start the game, and then I can focus on just like rules arbitration and like scene management for the stream. So like I was saying earlier, like close-ups of people's faces, or like showing a picture when it needs, you know, or hitting a video when it needs to, like I can focus on that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about it, like, you know, I wanted to do this like very like produced show, so that I could then have like a product that I could take to like, you know, the game that we're running is produced is published, sorry, by Green Ronin Press. And I was like, oh, I could take, you know, here's like a show, and I could take it to like Green Ronin or Wizards, or like, you know, any of the myriad of like publishers out there who have games that I'm interested in playing, and being like, look, like if you get me a team, like you don't even have to pay me, it would be nice, but like if you could just get me a team that I could delineate work to like make this a thing that I could do in like, you know, a month turnaround, or like a 2-month turnaround while I'm like producing another, like actively airing another show, preparing for the next thing. I was like, you know, before, you know, my impromptu vacation 2 weeks ago, I was like, yeah, if, you know, my life goes that way, cool. I like doing this stuff. I could be an art director and a show producer. Like that would be fun.
Yeah.
Now I'm like completely the opposite. I'm like, I kind of don't want to do that anymore, because that like you said, like taking a step away, you get that clarity. I'm like very much now sort of like, I want to draw comics. Like I've always wanted to like, work on comics, like that kind of stuff. But I was like, if I'm like self-producing comics, like I can like have like my comics, work on those for like 8 hours a day or whatever, then spend another 4 hours a day like doing side stuff or whatever, or like vice versa. Like if I get a job like as a show producer for like whatever, I could like do my own comics like in the night, and and then they'd be slower or whatever. But like that week off, I was like, I haven't drawn like a comic page in months. And like that's right now, that's all I want to do. And I'm gonna finish like the assets and everything for the show, because I still want to run the show and I have like a group of people waiting to play the game. But like after that, like I don't know, like I still am not a huge fan of like the 4 or 5 face cams and like nothing else. So like I'm not gonna just revert to like that, but like I'm definitely looking at games that are like maybe a lot less of the prep and like just more of the storytelling.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just
And
it. Even if you do something that is not necessarily what you think the best version of something is, but is a different, like it's focusing on something different, no matter what, that may not be like your ultimate end product of the thing you want to do. But if it's something that is you're directed towards doing it one specific way, even regardless of all the other knowledge you have, what that is happening there will be you're experimenting. You'll be experimenting with something or some sort of format, or just seeing what something feels like doing it. And the information that you take out from that, even if you don't ever do that thing again, you will fold into whatever final product thing that is. Like you may end up going completely no face cam, just, all clip art on, and everyone's audio is awful on purpose, But then it's because if you decided to do that, even if you're aware of exactly what the experiment was or not, you will come out of that with a piece of information that you clearly need answered. And like I find that I will do that all the time, totally subconsciously. And like it drives people mental when you're working with them, because they'll just be like, this is not what I thought we were doing. And it's like, well, it's not what we're doing. Like, well, why did we do it? I was like, I wanted to see what happened when you do this. It's like, what do you mean? Like, but the end product eventually is always way better if you just let yourself kind of have that freedom.
I think will be interesting is if in a couple of months after I have all the stuff prepared and like we're doing that show and I'm actually working, like drawing the comic that I have. Like I have a script for, it's an anthology of like 6 short stories. It's like each story is like 7 to 9 pages long. So we're looking at like 40 something pages, right? Of comic to like produce. I'm very curious to see if by like the midpoint of that project, if I'm like, I'm done with comics, I never want to do this again, I just want to produce RPG show, because maybe it's just like an over like work kind of like you get into the rut of like doing the thing. And I don't know.
I tell you what, like, these
it'd be interesting.
You showed me this like the listener question thing before. I've actually got a bunch of stuff to say on this one thing that ties into all of this in particular. Actually,
I was actually getting the I'm looking at the time here, and I was actually saying all that stuff to lead into that. And you know what?
I'm like, I've got things to say, but I don't want to. I kind of want to wait for this question, otherwise I'm going to burst it.
Here we go. Well, like let's as smooth a transition as that is.
Totally not
this for everybody out there, all you naughty listeners who skipped those ads, we're coming to the end of the show here. Every week now, that we're starting to get more engagement in the Discord and stuff. If you guys go to patreon.com/Volsham_art for just $1 a month, you get a bunch of stuff. But one of the things that is relevant to this is you get access to Patreon exclusive Discord channels where you can ask us questions. This week's question comes from Cascadia, Patreon supporter. They ask, what piece of advice can you give to someone interested in getting into your passionate subject field and or job?
Wow, good question. I never thought about that before. Let me have a think about I've actually like the first panel I gave at I've done a lot of panels at PAXs and conventions around the world, and well, the first one I did was turning your hobby into a career, and it was one that I was hosting, and it's essentially I'm in a lot of like I'm close to a lot of like cosplay community groups, a lot of artist groups, a lot of media groups, a lot of comedy, like a lot of comedians, a lot of performers, and all different way, shapes, and forms, and like game developers. And the one thing, especially now, like in our sort of age and where everyone can kind of access the knowledge whenever they want to online, if you want to get close to an industry or get into something in some way, it's like you're doing it. If you're a fan of say you want to get into game design, but you're a fan of Minecraft and you just keep playing Minecraft, and then you make like your own server and you have like a Discord community and you have mods and you're working with that. I know people that work for EA Games that had on their resume the only gaming experience was moderated Minecraft community on this, and they showed like what they did like on it and all the thing, and it's like, yeah, this is what we do professionally. This is what in the industry you do. Like if you're interested in like, you know, if you, I'm not talking to you in particular because you already do heaps of work and stuff with it, but if you wanted to get into doing like artwork for a company like Magic or Wizards of the Coast, you know, something like that, and your goal is I want that, like that kind of thing, just do your thing. You will find yourself moving around circles with other people who are also doing the same thing, and just have a good time. Build your relationships with those people. If you want to be a professional streamer, start streaming. Be in other people's chats and interact and engage with them. And those like connections and that, you'll just start sharing information naturally. And then like everything else, you will all eventually get a break. Like you'll reach certain levels of whatever you're doing. And then when that person becomes something in their industry, well, they're like, well, you know, they'll come across opportunities where they'll be like, well, hold on, like Skaidris does this stuff. He's someone that I've been bummed around with. And it's like, you're just all of a sudden known as that person that can do that thing, because it's, you know, there's always a new guard of people coming up. Like you shouldn't look at it as if you're entering yourself into like a group of people that are already there, as a club that's already there. You don't want to fucking join some old industry with a bunch of old people who already have their own friendship groups. Like if you're in your friendship group and there's a bunch of little kids come up and say, hey, can we start playing with you? It's like, who are you? You know, just do your own thing on your own fucking accord. And the other part of it is like, don't view what you do as a hobby. Like if like, not saying to put all incredible amounts of work in, don't treat it as a job. I'm saying if you're really good at fucking Command and Conquer Red Alert, that's not just something to brush away. If you're really, really good at one thing or whatever, it's a game or it could be just making anything. Like if you're really good at one thing that you normally view as a hobby, that's not a hobby. That's knowledge. That's an active skill.
Right.
And if that's if that's a part of, like, say it's a geek thing and you want to be in a geek industry and you're really good at it, great. Keep it up. Keep doing it. That's it. That's what you need to do. There's no fucking magic like, oh, if you send the email, the resume to here, then this person will see it. And if you use the right letterhead, then that'll really get their attention, show how expert you are. And then they'll see you as one of them. No, you like it. Just keep doing what you're doing. You will be interacting and growing your network base of just other people who are also doing what they're doing authentically. You will come across authentic. Your skill will naturally get better. You will move into more specified things of where you are more interested naturally in and will thrive in. And instead of just like, oh, I've got a goal for what I had when I was in high school, I want to do this exact thing. You're probably not even interested in doing that job anymore, to be honest. Like if you're just like sticking onto it, like you said, you're like, well, maybe I don't even want to do this stuff. Maybe I just want to do RPG things. So it's just like, just like respect your own attention and love for the thing that you're doing. And when you do naturally just get up to the next level of skill with it or whatever, when those people come across and see you loving and naturally doing what you're doing with fucking skill and confidence and everything, that is what will get you those jobs. That is what will get you that reputation, because it's authentic. There's no secret fucking resume trick. There's no talk to this person and scum on this thing. Just be authentic. And if you're not there yet with something, you shouldn't have that job. You don't want to work in a place where you're not up to scratch and speed and have the knowledge of something. And people know that. Like people, you can't. Yeah, it's not that they're like they're keeping you out and that it's like an in club or whatever. I mean, some instances those companies that have total in clubs and that, but in the long run, you know, there's no like, if only they did this, then they would love me and come in. It's like, you just got to do what you're doing and love it. And the right people, if you're showing authentic and you're a good person, the right people will be around you, and you will see those opportunities.
Authenticity is huge. You know, I would like two things I want to add to this. Authenticity is huge. People can see through you if you're just trying to manipulate or
you get it game a dime a dozen constantly. If someone's talking to you purely because they want an in for something, you can see it in their eyes the second they step up to you, because it's like when someone and any human walks up to you in some way, you're like, why is this person coming into my sphere? And then if all of a sudden it's like, everyone knows what the chit chat line someone says before they then say, oh, I'm gonna drop a resume, and you're just like, you're not here to talk to me, you're not interested in me. Once again, it's like there's no way to converse this person, so there's no way to really learn what this person actually can do. It's like they just love this thing, and that loving something is a dime a dozen, but if you just live it and have that authenticity, it shines.
And that you need to be genuine, you need to be interested in stuff, especially when you're working with other people. Like there was a guy that I was working with a few months back, and we don't talk anymore at all because I learned that guy was disingenuous. Like he was only doing things and using people to further himself. He didn't really care about the other people he was working with. Like he didn't give a shit. Like, I can remember conversations that like I accidentally like overheard. Well, technically read because it was like text messages, but for sake of argument, overheard conversations where the guy was like, I specifically want women like on this. He was being transphobic. Like he's like, I specifically want, AFAB women on this program because women bring in viewers for tabletop RPGs. And it was a game of like, I forget, it was like Lady Apocalypse or whatever. I forget the name of the thing that he was producing. But like, one of my trans friends, gender, was it bigender? I think I forget exactly how they identify, but point is, like, they identify as everything, and like we're willing to do drag, and like this guy was so focused on using women grossly for his own self gain, completely missed the fact that everybody who's like wants to watch girls and women gaming are also going to be like LGBT and trans positive for the most part, and like having those people on your channel and just being genuinely good friends with those people are going to get him those results that he wants, right? But he's just going about it in like the grossest, most manipulative sort of, no, we can't have them on the program because they're not, what I think is like, it's so fucking disgusting. So just like be just a genuine person to each other. Like when you're working with people, be like honest and open and like receptive of like the people you're working with. Just be a genuine, authentic person.
And when you see it, like those instances where, because the scumbags do make it through every now and then into industries. Like that does happen. When you see that, don't let that dishearten you, because 100% I can tell you, they do not last. Like when you're in a field or something, everyone knows each other, everyone talks, and if you're a scumbag and don't have fucking those true intentions and stuff, that will be revealed. And
Right.
no one will want to work with you. No one will want,
Exactly.
once you reveal that thing, you have no legs in the industry. And even if it like appears outwardly that they are and that they're getting all these jobs, it's likely that they're not getting all these jobs. It's that they're losing a lot of jobs. And yet there's that manipulative side of them that you're seeing, which looks like a continued success, is just they're going around and fucking shit up all over the place and getting fired and getting exposed, and they keep going around like. But that is not the way to go, and that is not success, and that is not what you will want if you are genuine with the field.
Yeah,
Don't let it dishearten
like
you.
what you need to do is make genuine connections with people and just be like a cool person, which brings me to the other point that I was gonna add to this like little postscript here is that especially for something like streaming or like really anything, but like we mentioned streaming, getting into streaming and stuff and being active in people's communities, legitimately like be active, be a part of whatever community it is, right? Whether you want to be an artist and like, you know, do comics or whatever, there are many Discord communities out there for, you know, art and like comics specifically, but just art in general. You know, forums, different places on the internet you can go, like YouTube channels. Like if you can like integrate yourself into those communities in a genuine way, and being like a positive force in the community, when you start producing the things that you want to produce, there will be people ready to accept it because they already know kind of who you are. They know you're a cool, genuine person, and they're going to want to support you because, you know, you're being a cool, genuine person. You know, as my grandfather would say, you're being a real mensch. You're just being a cool, awesome person, you know.
Like, and even a postscript to that, if you truly think that there's in the field you want to be in, say you streaming for example, if you want to stream and be a part of a community but you can't find the community that you most relate to, don't let that dishearten you, because what you may just have found is an opportunity to make a community yourself for that exact kind of thing, and believe in what you think your vision of what something should be. If you didn't connect with it in some way because you couldn't find, or you don't think that the culture was hitting on the thing that you want to do, create that. Like if you really want to then get into an industry or something for it, then you know, if you build it, they will come. Like that's been the premise for I think every business that I've done, is I'm like, I'm not seeing the thing that relates to me. I'm not seeing myself in any of these things. I'm going to try and do that. And then those people will come out. There's a field of dreams at 100%. And like those people will come out, and you will, even if they are out there somewhere, if you do something that you think you believe it, you want to see, the real ones out there will fucking turn up.
They will.
Like you, and like Grunge, like Genie, like Sawyer, all those people that we're talking about, I think, all totally real people. And they're all from around the world, and would never have come into contact with them regardless. Because when I came to Twitch, there was no one, to be honest, it was like one or two I kind of connected with, but not really at all. No one was doing anything I liked. But it wasn't until I started trying to express and, you know, acting like the community is what I want it to be like, until enough people came by and started gathering up, that it became that thing. And then I logged on to where other people were doing the things I liked. And it took a long time to really see Twitch for how I see it now.
And that's like a big thing, you know. I just want to like making those communities, if there is a gap that you find,
it's an opportunity.
They're like, this is something that literally like when is I have many coping mechanisms and like little like, you know, mantras that like help me work through big projects. Like it's not easy doing a 20-page, you know, comic book issue. Like that's at least a month to like draw and ink it, let alone color it, right? Like if you're good in like you're doing like a page a day, like it takes a long time. So like there, you get into the middle of it, and sometimes it's just literally like you just have to do the work. And sometimes, you know, the thing that gets me through that is thinking to myself, I'm interested in this, and there are almost 8 billion people on this planet. There has to be a significant portion of people on this planet that are going to be interested in what I'm making. It's going to be hard to find them, but I know they're out there. And just knowing that
they might not even know they want that either as well. They might just have that same hole missing in them.
Right.
And when they see you doing your thing with confidence, then they go, oh, if they can do that with confidence, then why can't we? I mean, Geek Punk, the whole point of it is like Geek Punk is like essentially I wrote a manifesto before I started making any content. And it essentially was I believe that people within like a geek and sort of escapism communities are the best fucking people, the most intelligent, the most creative, the most potentially impactful people, yet we are also extremely vulnerable, and culturally what was happening is that was being taken advantage of. And that like when people are in their most sort of perilous points in their life at that thing, they're more easily swayed by weird right-wing fucking ideas and concepts because they allow people to like accept what they're doing and move on and not have to analyze stuff. But there are real active, like positive ways to use that in great ways, and that they can be parts of communities and like, you know, be cool and feel cool. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to show people that you can be the fucking nerdiest, geekiest person on the planet and be fucking cool. Like, fuck you, I'm cool. Suck it. Like, I don't give a shit. I'm gonna do my thing regardless. Someone comes in and tries to troll on me, I'm gonna laugh at them because they're gonna fuck themselves, you know? I don't care. Yeah.
I think, you know, I think as the final thought here, and you know, let me know if you agree with this. I think no matter how neurotypical or neuroatypical you may be, I don't think anyone is so far out there, so far unique that you can't find a community in the thing that you like. Whether you have to make it yourself or do a lot of legwork finding the community, whatever it is that you want to be a part of that you feel very strongly about, just statistically, with 8 billion people on the planet, there has to be a group out there for you.
Yeah, 100%. Agreed.
And I think, you know, I hope maybe this podcast more than some of the ones where like we're just talking you know, to artists and like how you get started and like, you know, how do you draw a face correctly or whatever we talk about. I think, you know, this one may have a few more life lessons out there for our listeners than some others. And I have greatly enjoyed this conversation, Skadris. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to talk to Scooter, and then, you know, and then down the line, I'd like to have both of you guys on here to like maybe talk specifically about like Geek Punks and what you guys do as a group.
Yeah, it's fucking hectic when we're both doing stuff.
Hell yeah, dude. Well, like I said, thank you so much for hanging out with me. And to all of our listeners out there, have a great week, everybody.
See you, everyone.